Smurf, this is cool.
Christ clean me up. Christ clean me up. I ain't got a stain and I'm feeling brand new. Yeah, 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 yeah. Christ clean me up. Yeah, I'm like this. The gospel, my friend, made me righteous. Now I'm walking like Christ in his likeness. I can't live the same, I don't desire it. Hold on, man. We're gonna do it like this. Yeah, I'm like this. The gospel, my friend, made me righteous. Walking like Christ in his likeness. Can't live the same, I don't desire it. Cause I admire him. Yeah, boy, I'm like this. The gospel changed me up, I got a new frame. Can't live the same, I got a new brain. New eyes, new heart, can't do the same. Yeah, got a new name. Yeah, boy, I'm like this. Righteous all because of Christ did. Being conformed to his likeness, new man's priceless. Yeah, he didn't leave me in the muck and mire. He constantly cleaning me up. He giving new desires. By his grace, ain't living the same. Living in shame, living unashamed. Living to give glory to his names. Christians repent, we had a change of mind. So we literally ain't seeing the same. New frame, new brain. Yeah, my faith in God brought new actions. Before I chase worldly passions. Yeah, now I'm like this, righteous. Hey, brothers, no longer blind. Yeah, I'm like this. The gospel, my friend, made me righteous. Walking like Christ in his likeness. Can't live the same, I don't desire it. Cause I admire him. Yeah, boy, I'm like this. The gospel changed me up, I got a new frame. Can't live the same, I got a new brain. New eyes, new heart, can't do the same. Yeah, got a new name. Yeah, boy, I'm like this.
But the evidence, by going off of what you have put forward in terms of the actual documentary evidence, is not just less than convincing in my respect. And I mean this with respect because I think you have done a lot of research. You've traveled to these places. I have too. Like, this is what I do as my career. But I'm not really getting indication because in history, we go to the primary sources in their primary languages. And when Mark asked, okay, why do you deny the crucifixion? The sources you used were not primary.
Okay, we're still talking about the same thing over and over again. There's so much more we can talk about here. We're wasting a lot of time. There's so much more. That's this amount.
Do you guys
There's so
think,
much more stuff to talk about?
Do you think that
all things theology, we chop it up properly without an apology. Gotta give that apology to God, hallowed be, cause this is how we do it at All Things Theology.
Well, yo, grace and peace. Grace and peace. Welcome back to another episode of All Things Theology, where this is your host, K-Dub. And today, man, we got to talk about Billy Carson. Or, I got a perfect sound effect. I had to download a new one just to describe what I thought about the debate.
Crack is cheap. I make too much money to ever smoke crack. Let's get that straight, okay? We don't do crack. We don't do that. Crack is whack.
Yes, crack is whack. And we recommend here at All Things Theology to stay off of it. Say no to drugs, right? Tell them All Things Theology sent you. Yeah, man, this was crazy. Or as the young kids say, Wes, hey, man, shout out to Wes, man, because he ate all the crumbs, man. He ate all of them. Yeah, man. Hey, shout out to him, man. Wes is a patron saint, right? Not a Roman Catholic, but we may give him sainthood after this debate with the level of patience he demonstrated, right? It was amazing. It was amazing. I wanted to talk about this debate. I'm going to play it. We're going to go over and give some commentary over it. I may actually have Vocab Malone on tomorrow. We may talk about some other things. We'll see. But look, man, I don't want to waste your time. Look, let's get right into it because, man, this was a wild debate. And let me just say, I want some couple of things to that we can learn from this debate. Christianity is true. Christianity is true, and opponents of the faith don't really have much argument. Let me just say this. Billy is seen as one of the more sophisticated intellectual opponents of Christianity. And when he actually met a real scholar, the meme level antics fell apart. And we're going to see that. Let's get into it.
PhD and athlete wannabe. I like how you threw that in the bio right there. And Wesley, my man, I think it would be great to. I know you guys were both recently in Egypt. There's tons that I'm interested in. That how all these things show up in Egypt is baffling to me. But just going right to it, I had here. Billy, you talk about how Jesus was never crucified, which is interesting because my wife, who's a Muslim, they believe that as well. Mm-hmm. Their beliefs, from what I understand from her, are they don't think that Jesus, as they believe is a prophet, God would have him killed. But
yeah, so Islam operates on a presuppositional theory, right? They deny the son, so right, they don't believe God would kill his son. So some Muslims have they've put forth a theory, swoon theory, that it wasn't Jesus that died, but it was someone who looked like Jesus. So they crucify the wrong guy, which is completely absurd, right? Yeah, the host claims to be Christian, but some of his beliefs are quite strange. Now, some people have said he's a new Christian, so give him grace. Okay, I actually want to skip past a lot of what he says because I felt so much of what he said was actually just kind of deflecting from the real issue. So yeah, let me just say this. To deny Jesus Christ died on the cross is one of the most laughable, absurd things historically. So much so that even atheists and agnostics who actually do like scholarly historical work, not just meme level stuff, right? Nobody denies this from a historical perspective. I mean, let me say not no one. You have to be absurd. Matter of fact, Bart Ehrman, one of the leading agnostic atheist scholars, right? Does a lot of textual critical work, says it's one of the most sure things in history. I remember he was on a podcast once and the atheists were like asking him, what do you think the Bible's really about? He was like, a man who preached the gospel and died on a Roman cross. It's like, we know what the Bible is about, Look, okay, you don't believe the supernatural claims, okay. But to deny what happened is just absurd. But let's keep going because Billy says some remarkable things, and shout out to Wes again.
I don't think they have any historical evidence as far as I know as to what or how or why they believe that. I'm curious for you guys both, and if you want to, I guess, go first, Billy, as to how you came about like the findings where it seems that Jesus was not crucified, or that's not accurate.
Sure. And in my videos, and if you listen to the podcast, the statement is according to the Sinai Bible. Okay, according to the Sinai Bible, Jesus wasn't crucified in that Bible. And that Bible predates the King James Version of the Bible, and the text.
Now, Wes is about to eat this up, so I'm gonna let him deal with it.
There actually is about.
But the argument that Billy is making is, according to the Sinai Bible, Jesus was never crucified. Okay.
The 14,000 differences between the Sinai Bible and the King James Version of the Bible, which came much later.
Now, one thing you have to, because atheists, unbelievers, skeptics will throw out these claims, but they don't contextualize it because they say there's 14,000 differences between the Sinai Bible and the King James Version. Now, if you just hear that, you think, oh my goodness, there are some radical differences between the Bible I possess today and then this ancient manuscript. That's not now, because remember, a difference or even an error, according to these these manuscripts versus the translations we have, majority of them are small. I mean what they call a difference is something like a duplication of a word, a deletion of a word, unintentionally, a copying of a line twice. That's also considered. So when you actually examine some of these differences, they're so minor. It's like, why would they need someone bring them up unless they have an agenda, right? 14,000 differences. You would think to yourself, man, I can't trust my Bible. It's 14,000 differences, right? See, they're leading, spelling mistakes, punctual errors. Those are mistakes, but they're not credible mistakes. They will not lead you to a radical difference to believe Jesus died and he didn't die. There's nothing like that. But skeptics don't want to contextualize stuff, right? They'll use any argument to get people away from the faith. Remember, because they don't have to be credible, right?
And then also one of the things that were interesting is that they discovered the book of Jesus' wife, which is at the Harvard Seminary, which, according to some scholars, is a little controversial, but they claim that this is an accurate record that Jesus may have even been married, which then, adds more if that's true.
Let me deal with Bean Pie's question. So she says, so is God's word perfect or not? Of course it is. But what does manuscript errors have to do with the word of God? As far as, because here's the claim. If we're going to use this level of argument, then I copy the Bible, I make a radical change, and then that nullifies the Bible. No, that's absurd. No rational, logical thinking person should think that. Right, that a copying error means the Bible is not perfect. Right, that's absurd.
It adds more to the hypothesis that maybe he wasn't crucified. I just personally believe that Jesus was an amazing human being. I don't think that he was the Son of God in the sense that he's God.
Now, he says Jesus is an amazing human being, but later in this debate, he's actually going to criticize Jesus. He's like, hey, I don't believe he's God. But watch this.
But that we're all gods, as he said.
So Jesus isn't God, but we're all gods. So Jesus is lesser than us. This amazing, great person. It's just, there's so many contradictions in this man's statement. I'm like, don't be fearful. Don't be fearful when, you have this scholastic person, allegedly, come up here making these claims. I mean, some grandmas in my church could have dealt with some of Billy's claims. I don't mean that to be insulting to him. I'm just saying that's how low level they were, We
are gods, and that we're to do greater things in him. And I just personally believe that the return of the Christ is the return of the Christ consciousness. When we can all achieve.
Now, this Christ consciousness idea is explicitly New Thought. Billy Carson is expressing New Thought. Now, there have been people who claim to be Christians. You may have recognized one person I may name here. Carlton Pearson was a proponent of New Thought theology as well. And he sounds like a Carlton Pearson. Now, Carlton Pearson Christianized his New Thought, where Billy Carson is de-Christianizing his New Thought. But it's the same ideology. About this Christ consciousness of the being, and you just hear the language. It's explicitly New Thought. By the way, shout out to Rick Caldwell, who did a video last night covering Billy Carson's crash out. He's explained, Rick Caldwell has explained New Thought as well. So definitely want to subscribe to his channel.
A certain level of knowledge, wisdom, passion, understanding, empathy, love that he came to this planet with. And we get that in our mind and our conscience, and we can act on those incredible emotions and that understanding, that the whole world is going to transform instantaneously. And I think that the second coming is the coming of the Christ consciousness to the planet, not a human being flying back to Earth to save people.
Well, besides the characterization of that, right? You have to just deny the Bible. You have to deny the manuscript history. You have to deny so much of the Bible just to kind of come to the conclusion. It was, well, it's not Jesus coming personally, bodily, it's this conscious idea that's coming. Yeah, because conscious ideas destroy people. It judges the wicked and saves the righteous. Yeah, that's absurd.
That's just my personal understanding of how I've perceived it over many, many years of going through this information and going through all this text.
And Wes, I'm gonna let you respond to that. And again, I mean, this is everyone listening to the show. I'm always like, challenge everything. Learn to critically think and continue to come to your conclusions. Even with Jesus, I'm not personally even waiting on that he has to come back to. I already know like I said, that strength of God and consciousness is already. I can tap into that right now. So you don't have to wait for him to come back. For those that believe
Now, this is supposed to be the Christian. That's why I say some of this is so strange, but I don't think he has too much to say. But next time he talks, I'm just going to get past what he says, because it's like, let Wes cook. Let the man eat all the crumbs, man.
To actually have that like next level of what that's supposed to mean. But Wes, go ahead on for what Billy was talking about. I think with a book in the Harvard Museum, and I heard something about Jesus's wife, which that's yeah.
Yeah, well, first let me say I think it's really cool to not just be in the room proverbially with you, Billy, but be able to interact with you. Because I wish I could be there in person. Unfortunately, Toronto, Canada, is a long way away from Florida. It's a little bit of a jaunt. But I really appreciate the fact that you seem to have investigated to a certain degree some of these facts. Do you mind if I ask a clarifying question?
Sure.
When you say the Sinai Bible, what are you referring to specifically?
It's the biblical text that was written. It made it into you can actually look it up on Amazon. It's a Bible I have a version at home. It's called the Sinai Bible, right, from Mount Sinai. I'm assuming that's the mountain that they're referencing there. But they put together their own version of the biblical text prior to the King James Version being put out.
Sure. So when you refer to the Sinai Bible, would you be referring to Codex Sinaiticus? Like the codex that comes... Okay. That's why I was trying to get some clarification. Because, so you can actually go...
Now, let me take a moment to say something. This is the ambush that Billy was talking about. How you got ambushed by Wes. What I do like that Wes is doing is he's asking clarifying questions. Okay, when you say this, what do you mean? So there's no confusion, right? No confusion at all, right? I do like this. And Billy doesn't appear like he just got out the hospital right now, right? He's able to articulate his ideas. Yes, they're absurd, but nevertheless.
Go and see Codex Sinaiticus is at the British Library. So you can go and see it. It's on display. And the British Library has actually digitized the entire manuscript. So I work with manuscripts in my linguistic work. I'm an expert on early Christian scribal culture, and particularly in Greek and Coptic manuscripts. I actually have a facsimile. So I have a photocopy.
Yeah, you talking to a real scholar. That's what Wes said. Let me put it to you in the hood vernacular. You talking to a real person right now who know what they talking about, right? This ain't no internet meme. See, it's easy on your little YouTube channel, right, to make all these claims and go on Joe Rogan and get unchecked, do your little TED Talks, but you talking to a real scholar. Wes is what you call an authoritative or an authority on the subject. Not that he's authoritative, right? But this is scholarly language. He himself is an authority because he knows what he's talking about. He studied, et cetera, et cetera. And you're making all these large claims. And Wes is like, no, yeah, certified hood scholar, right? You talking to a dude that know what he's talking about, right? That is Wes. And he's about to take him to school in the most gracious, humble way. Hey, Wes, you better than me, bro. You better than me.
It was done by the British Library of Codex Sinaiticus that I work with in my office. So I have it here. And the only reason I asked for clarification is because I want to make sure that what I'm addressing is actually what you mean.
Gotcha.
And not addressing something else. Because the Codex Sinaiticus in particular is just it's a 4th century Greek manuscript. Mm-hmm. It comes from approximately between 325 and 350 AD. And its text of the Gospels reads almost identical to the modern Greek text that we develop translations from. So my curiosity is just simply in kind of exploring when you say that it denies the crucifixion or that the crucifixion isn't there. I mean, I can go on right now, Codex Sinaiticus, and I can look up the end of, say, Matthew 27, where it has Jesus being crucified. Yeah. And that's in Codex Sinaiticus, or, the John 19, or any of the other ones. So I think my confusion is that it doesn't read any differently. So actually...
Yeah, Wes is like, I'm confused. Because I hear you saying something, but I have literally the evidence in my hand that says the opposite of what you're saying. Now, Billy's answer is going to be quite interesting.
Are you able to pull up a website with the viewers
I'm
or listeners or whatever be able to see
it
that?
right now to make sure I have the version that I'm looking at.
While he's pulling that up too, like I keep saying to all the people that aren't scientists traveling the world and linguists, I don't even know how to pronounce it the right way, like me.
Linguists?
Cyanide.
Let me try to get past this guy because I mean I'm sorry, he kind of annoys me. I'm sorry to the guy. Hold on, let me get past him. Sorry.
I've actually worked with. There are two manuscripts of the Gospel of Barnabas. The Gospel of Barnabas is a really interesting document because it is a known forgery, and so that's why I think it's important to get to these sources. So, at the very start of the Gospel of Barnabas, which we only have two copies of, one is in Italian and one is in Spanish. We see right off the bat that
Billy appealed. Hold on, let me see if I can go back because Wes caught him on like, hey, Sinaiticus doesn't say what you wanted to say, but then Billy appeals to Barnabas. Watch this.
Eyewitness. I studied C.S. Lewis back in the day. How many different eyewitnesses and stuff there were, and they went on purpose to mention so many other names that they were able to like cross-reference throughout history and throughout those times, from my understanding. And those were different things that I always thought were kind of interesting that I felt was a good concept of proof. And then I want Billy to answer. And also, I'm just curious, like the Sinai Bible, where was that piece
I found
discovered?
the text where I was referencing. Actually, I was misquoted. I misquoted there. It's the Gospel of Barnabas.
Okay, yeah. Well, so that's good. So let's deal with that too, because I've actually worked with. There are two manuscripts of the Gospel of Barnabas. The Gospel of Barnabas is a really interesting document because it is a known forgery, and so that's why I.
He's like, oh wait, it wasn't Sinaiticus, it was Barnabas. Well, that's worse. Because it's a known forgery. Like, Wes is going to say, like, every reputable scholar, like, if you want to be reputable, you would not deny this fact. It is a known fact. The Gospel of Barnabas is a fraudulent source. And Wes is going to demonstrate that. Watch.
I think it's important to get to these sources. So, at the very start of the Gospel of Barnabas, which we only have two copies of, one is in Italian and one is in Spanish. We see right off the bat that the Gospel of Barnabas, not to be confused with either the Epistle of Barnabas or the Acts of Barnabas, which are two apocryphal documents from the 2nd century, but the Gospel of Barnabas in particular,
it's a Gnostic source.
We know it's a forgery because it does things like in chapter 92, it says that Jesus spent 40 days on Mount Sinai and then he came to the Jordan River and he walked to Jerusalem. But Mount Sinai is more than a week's journey away from Jerusalem, and neither Mount Sinai nor Jerusalem are close to the Jordan River. So never mind there not being a route from the Jordan River to like around Mount Sinai or going to Jerusalem. But there are internal problems with the Gospel of Barnabas, which indicate that it shows no actual indication of evidence of coming from or even having knowledge of first century Jewish understanding. It actually says Jesus is the Christ, but not the Messiah, which indicates that whoever the author is, he didn't know that those were the same words. And I think a bigger problem is that
So right now, Wes is demonstrating an internal critique of the Gospel of Barnabas, showing the ignorance of the writer, not knowing Christ and Messiah, right, are not two different things, but one of the same, right? Obviously, Messiah coming from the Hebrew, right? Christ, Greek, right? Christos. And so he's just showing the ignorance of the writer of Barnabas. Like, it's no Hebrew writer would have said this, right? No author during that time would have said anything like this. So good work by Wes here.
Gospel of Barnabas actually paraphrases Dante's Inferno, which was written in 1314. So there's a lot of internal evidences that disqualify the Gospel of Barnabas, never mind the fact that we don't have any evidence of it prior to the 14th century, and none in any other language other than Middle Age Italian Italian and Spanish. But the internal content of the Gospel of Barnabas disqualifies it from being ancient.
So again, he's demonstrating, and this kind of gets into external evidences of the book. So he's talking about like, man, we don't really have any early history, right? Just Italian, Spanish manuscripts, and then the internal critique of the book as well demonstrates the fraudulent source of it as well. I mean, this is a whole science of work here when you're speaking about textual criticism and things like that. So, I mean, Wes knows his stuff, right? I mean, very, very intelligent man.
And then the fact that it's doing things like paraphrasing Dante, or it also refers to a rule of the time of Jubilee, which was changed in the Middle Ages from what it was in the biblical year of Jubilee. And it goes with the Middle Ages concept, not the ancient concept. So I think what I'm getting at is, so I'm a historian.
Yep.
And I deal with sources. So when I'm looking at sources,
I'm sorry. I know Wes is not trying to be funny, but some of the parts of this debate was funny. He's like, no offense, but I actually deal in sources. This ain't your meme thing. This is me interpreting him, but let him cook.
I want to make sure that I have a methodology by which I approach any type of source. So if there is something that denies the crucifixion, I want to make sure that I'm analyzing it, and that the methodology by which I analyze it actually reveals that the content can be accurately tied to the event. So if we're talking about, say, Codex Sinaiticus, that's in the 4th century. Now that is, I would agree with you, Billy, our oldest copy of the Bible in the sense of cover to cover, Genesis to Revelation copy of the Bible.
Right.
The problem is that we have individual copies of all 4 Gospels going back hundreds of years before Codex Sinaiticus. So I have a facsimile behind me of P66. This is a late 2nd century copy of the Gospel of John. I work with this particular manuscript. I can just show the screen right here. This is an almost complete copy of the Gospel of John. And it
is that the
has the
Papyro
crucifixion
by any chance?
Yeah. So
notice Wes. I mean, he's pulling out the sources, right? And I understand Wes isn't, he's on, he's not at home. But Wes has the sources citing what he's talking about. Primary sources, not referring to some document in the 1967. I watched his little crash out video last night. He's like referring to something in the 1960s and Roman Catholicism. It was just quite strange.
Papyrus is just the what it's made out of.
Right.
So
material it's on.
I got that from Chat GPT, by the way.
Dude, be
Sorry,
quiet.
guys, I'm just trying to sound smart for a second.
I have that papyrus at home.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
so I'll show you this. So the documents you actually see on my bookshelf behind me are facsimile papyri that I've made. Mm-hmm. So when I was in Egypt last summer, I went and I made for me some papyrus sheets. And so I take these papyrus sheets, which are made from the papyrus plant. And then when I go and I look at actual manuscripts, so I was at the University of Philadelphia last summer, and I went and I saw a document called P1, which is a 3rd century fragment of the beginning of the Gospel of Matthew. And so what I did is I sat down with that original and I produced a facsimile. So I copied,
like Wes keeps bringing out source after source. Look, hey, I visited in Philadelphia where they have P1 manuscript. Look, and I have a copy that I made myself, facsimile. And here it is. Like, how can you argue with someone like this? Like, Billy, bro, give it up, bro. Give it up, bro. Look, now I see why he charged $50K for a debate. No. Yeah, after this. After this, you do, Billy. That boy said, my neck, my back, my neck and my back. He all sorts of stuff. Shout out to Wes, man. Susie Q just dropped a link to his channel. Man, maybe I'll reach out to him just to talk about this. But homie's just pulling facts after fact after fact. And Billy's just over there looking like he ain't ate lunch all day. Look, he just got that sour face on, man. Oh man, I accidentally went back. Hold on, let me go back to that part. All right.
Cover to cover, Genesis to Revelation copy of the Bible.
Right.
The problem is that we have individual copies of all 4 Gospels going back hundreds of years before Codex Sinaiticus. So I have a facsimile behind me of P66. This is a late 2nd century copy of the Gospel of John. I work with this particular manuscript. I can just show the screen right here. This is an almost complete copy of the Gospel of John. And and it
Is that the
has the
papyra by
crucifixion.
any chance?
Yeah,
that a
so
word that I just
papyrus
made
is
up?
just the what it's made out of.
Sorry, I went back a little too far. Here we go.
I go and I look at actual manuscripts. So I was at the University of Philadelphia last summer, and I went and I saw a document called P1, which is a 3rd century fragment of the beginning of the Gospel of Matthew. And so what I did is I sat down with that original and I produced a facsimile. So I copied the text. First of all, I cut it out with an X-Acto knife in not the original 3rd century one on my papyrus. I cut out with an X-Acto knife this guy, and then I copied the text transcriptionally on the front and the back. So papyrus is just simply, it's what it's made out of.
Yeah.
And so there's categorizing systems, and the standard one is called the Gregory Alland categorizing system. And so sometimes you'll see when manuscripts are mentioned, they'll have a GA and then a number behind it. If it's made of papyrus, you simply abbreviate the word papyrus to P, and then you have the numbering system. So P66, what I showed you earlier, that's this on the categorizing system. It's the 66th manuscript that was put into the system. It's from the Gospel of John. I also have, P46 and P47 on my shelf, which includes all 4 Gospels and Acts from the 2nd and 3rd centuries. So the only hesitation I have with what you said, Billy, is that we have single copies of the Gospels that can be dated to the 2nd century that all do have the crucifixion. And so if we're
Yeah, he's like, the only problem I have with what you said is what you said was false. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, he's like, everything you're saying is actually demonstrated to be false by textual history. So it's like, I don't know why you would say that. And Wes did it graciously. Because, I mean, I probably would be like, Wes, what you just said. I'd hit him with the Billy Madison line, right? What you just said made everybody in the room dumber, right? You are rewarded 0 points. And may God have mercy on your soul, right? That's me. Because I'm still, look, the Lord is still working on me, right? But Wes, hey, he's saint of saints.
Relying on something like the Gospel of Barnabas, which is not just like, it's not that there's debate about it. It's that it's a known forgery. I mean, no one's referring to the Gospel of Barnabas as anything other than.
If you say it's a known forgery and expert, I'm going to go with that. Let's talk about the Old Testament a little bit.
So he's like, if you say it's a known forgery, then I'll go with that. Well, that literally invalidates everything you've been saying. I mean, and now you want to jump to something else? Like okay, a little more epistemic humility here would just be say what I said was false and literally demonstrate it right before my face. And Billy just like, well, next subject. Sir.
And leading up into the New Testament.
Well, hold on, because do you mind if I address the Gospel of Jesus' wife?
Sure, go ahead.
What was her name again? I'm like trying to write notes like I know what I'm doing, but I'm just curious.
So the Gospel of Jesus' wife doesn't actually mention. So oftentimes what happens is that the text of the Gospel of Jesus' wife is kind of paralleled with the Gospel of Philip, which mentions that that Jesus would kiss Mary Magdalene on the mouth. And so those are kind of used in parallel to kind of for this argument that Jesus was married. So the Gospel of Jesus' wife is in the Harvard Library. However, the reason we know it's also not legitimate is because even though the manuscript, the papyrus that it's on, was carbon dated to the 4th century, the text was actually copied from a PDF version of the Gospel of Thomas known as Grandin's Interlinear. And there was a mistake in the Coptic text of Grandin's Interlinear that was copied into the Gospel of Jesus' wife. So we know that this is not a legitimate document, even though the papyrus is ancient, and this happens a lot with forgeries. I have a couple of friends who have actually worked on projects that have revealed forgeries within Dead Sea Scroll manuscripts and within other ancient Christian papyri. But the reason why we know the Gospel of Jesus' wife and that Karen King, who kind of vouched for it and she lost a lot of credibility, unfortunately, for her and she's admitted that it's a fake as well.
So the person who like started this, you know, I don't know, lack of better words, rumor about this document of Jesus' wife being of ancient antiquity has now admitted it's false. What more do you want, right? Hit him with the Tyrese. What more do you want from me, right? I can't imagine just be like everything I said, literally just being walked through line by line, showing me how false I was and saying, well, let's get to the Old Testament now, sir. Like you have shown your level of credibility is not high enough to even let's go to the Old Testament, you know?
Because we can tie it directly to not copying from an ancient text, but actually copying from an online version of the Gospel of Thomas in a PDF form. And the mistake on that PDF form was copied into the text of that was borrowed in the phraseology of Jesus' wife. So I just point that out is, once again, with our sourcing, I think we need to make sure that we're going towards not just early sources, but actually credible sources.
Yes, primary.
And unfortunately, neither the Gospel of Barnabas nor the Gospel of Jesus' wife are credible sources in terms of actually, and agreed upon by not just the vast majority of scholarship, but I don't know anybody in the field of papyrology, paleography, historiography, who actually refers to these documents as being legitimate.
That's fair enough. I can respect that.
That's fair enough. That's all you have to say. That's all you have to say after you literally walked. Okay, fair enough. Well, you have to drop your argument because if he showed that the sources you use to make your claim are false and fraudulent, then that means the claim you made about Jesus not being crucified is not credible now. I mean, can he not see that?
So let's go into the Old Testament a little bit. Predominantly from my research, I discovered that a lot of information from the Enuma Elish and the 7 tablets of creation is a lot of in Genesis, a lot of the creation story that comes into Genesis. Not all of it, but because obviously Genesis is a much smaller version of a much bigger story. But it's literally almost word for word from the Enuma Elish and the 7 tablets of creation. The Epic of Atrahasis as well is also there in the Old Testament. Several other tablets as well, Code upon Hammurabi and a few others have made it into that text. Sumerian cylinder scrolls that talk about the creation story. Again, the creation story in the Epic of Atrahasis. And so we tend to see this copying of ancient tablets, text, and scriptures, even some papyruses, into the biblical text. Meaning that my point here is that I think a lot of people are saying that this information was written in real time. A lot of people believe that. If you ask the average person, they really believe that. But a lot of this information is just copied from older tablets and texts from an earlier date. That's what I have found, that it's made it into the canonized Bible, but they never reference that they got it from any other ancient texts and tablets that have to do with a totally different civilization with totally different religious beliefs.
Have you read the Enuma Elish? Yeah,
I've done lectures on it.
Sure. Do you mind summarizing the content of the creation account in the Enuma Elish for us?
So here now, Billy is about to go on a wild spaceship ride. He's asking him to summarize this document, and here goes.
Sure. The Enuma Elish is a very ancient text discovered in the Library of Ashurbanipal, and the summary of it is that it really gives us an account, which is crazy, an astronomical account of the creation of our solar system. It talks about planets and moons gaining specific orbits around the sun. It talks about a huge planet named Tiamat, 4 to 6 times larger than Earth. Earth didn't exist at the time that this, according to the author of this text.
I like what Christian Doc says. She says, wow, Billy really isn't getting the opportunity to talk at all. Because one of the things he was like, man, the internet, Wes's internet was messing up and I was barely able to respond to him. And maybe there was one section where Wes internet buffers, but not even enough. enough to like talk about it, but this is just strange. But he is talking for the majority of this time, him and his buddy here,
which is pretty interesting. And then there's talks about a nemesis of sorts. In the original version, it's called Nibiru, but in a more recent version, still thousands of years old, the name was changed to Marduk. Marduk is in the Jewish American Library, in the biblical text, in the Torah, and so forth. Very popular figure in ancient times in the religious books and texts. Marduk wanted to be the destroyer, so Marduk is the one that during its next orbit towards Tiamat, crashed into Tiamat and destroyed Tiamat. A huge chunk of it swung away, recoalesced, taking the water, land, and organic material, which basically recoalesced as our planet here, Earth. And the rest of it broke up into pieces. Some of it turned into the asteroid belt. Other parts of it were thrown towards the sun, and some were thrown towards the inner Oort cloud, towards the outer edge of the solar system. This planet, or this moonlet that orbited supposedly a brown dwarf, basing on the description of it, gained a very strange orbit around our sun. And we have the scientific evidence now also to match with NASA's data, where we see that Saturn and I believe Neptune switch places. Uranus is flipped on its side, and that's more evidence that something came through our solar system in ancient times. And
now he asked him about this document, and Billy's just going on to he's about to talk about aliens and all sorts of stuff, right?
Gravitationally really tugged at planets here and switched up their orbits and even pulled the axis of a planet on its own side, where the equator is now running north and south. So a little bit of modern astrophysics kind of backs up what this ancient text is saying. But the New Militia also then begins to talk about the fact that these beings, it kind of cuts into the fact that these beings, are on Earth and at some point begin to engage mankind. In other words, they didn't create people from scratch, but they engaged the existing hominid and began to utilize us as workers for their workforce. In the Atrahasis epic, you see a much similar story, slightly later date period, but still thousands of years old, the epic of Atrahasis, and we see a very similar story.
And Wes is like, let me put up my sources because we're clearly not about to return to this.
And we see where the sons of God literally came down to Earth. They came from Mars, according to this text. If you read the translation of the planet Mars and to English, and then they went to battle. They were going to go to battle in South Africa against Enki and Lil and Anu, and they come to terms without going to battle. They argued that they needed women, human women, believe it or not, and they also wanted a workforce. They didn't want to continue to do the labor. They were cleaning out the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, digging canals, building cities on Earth, and according to the text on Mars, not according to me. And a decision was made by Enki and Anu and Enlil to...
Wes said, give me a summary of this document. This man literally he's gone. He like reading the book, man. Get a summary, like a 1 to 2 minute summary.
Allow this experiment to happen, where they would take the existing hominid here. They would slay one of the gods, meaning that they would, in my opinion, that doesn't mean that they're going to kill it, but somehow, some type of genetic modification or manipulation, in my personal opinion, that's my personal hypothesis. But in the end,
he didn't ask for your hypothesis. Give a summary of this document.
It ends up being that human beings are now doing a lot of this labor and worshiping these people as gods, as they, my personal opinion, masqueraded as gods.
And this is exactly why I started off the clip with this.
Crack is cheap. I make too much money to ever smoke crack. Let's get that straight, okay? We don't do crack. We don't do that. Crack is whack.
Yes, crack is whack. Shout out to Chavez. He's talking a crossword puzzle.
A lot of stories there, parallel stories that you see in the Bible, even the Tower of Babel incident and many other crazy stories that are in the Bible. You can find a lot of those true stories in the ancient text, like the Epic of Gilgamesh, where you can find the true story of Noah. They found the Noah tablet to give him instructions on how to build the ark. It wasn't a big boat. It was a round disc that he built with sections cut up on the inside like a pie. That was discovered about 4 or 5 years ago. I believe it's at the British Museum now. So there's a lot of text that's just been covered and copied over into the biblical text. And I think that, in my personal opinion, a lot of people are just became a cargo cult, worshiping people that were masquerading as gods. I do believe in God, by the way. Let me make this clear. I believe in God. I believe I believe in that there's a creator of the universe. I believe that the mathematics, the quantum physics, all proves that. The fact that we're here, I believe this universe is imbued with a divine energy and a divine spark that lives inside of all of us.
This is exactly the language of the Gnostics. The Gnostics all talked about the divine spark, right? From the pleroma, right? And all this, the divine spark in all of us. You know, this is why we're all gods. You know, we all have this goodness in us. This. Now you can see why he hates the God of the Bible. Yes, I'm using that language. He hates the God of the Bible. He's not operating on the same playing field. And that's why he says the most absurd things. He uses dishonest arguments against the Bible, right? When your God is false, you don't have to be truthful, right? But let's keep going.
I just don't believe that the God of the Bible is truly the creator of the universe. I don't think that God needs money. I don't think that God needs
sure. Do you mind if I just jump in here for a second?
Yeah, let me address this.
I think we've kind of gone on from the original question. I appreciate that. I do have a few issues with your summary, although I think I have read the Akkadian version. My Akkadian's not great, but I sat down with a seriologist friend and we walked.
Now, Wes is about to give a summary of the document, right? Because Wes is like, I do have some issues with what you said, right? Because the part of the problem with Billy is he brought up way other stuff. Like he's just going on a tangent now and just talking, right? Now he's talking about literally Gnosticism, right? He asked you about a summary of the document. And now, so listen to Wes's summary.
Walked through it a couple of years ago. So I think that there are components of what you said that I would say are in there. I'm not sure it's the best summary. Nonetheless, okay, going with what you said.
So nice.
You said that there were like verbatim parallels with the biblical creation story. Even just going off of what you said, which I think there are components of that I would agree with, you know, the battle of the gods, you know, the concept of Enki and the younger gods, and they fight Tiamat, and then Marduk, who swears he'll defeat Tiamat, and Quenku, who kills Tiamat by shooting her with an arrow, and there's this big battle, and then the gods that die end up being the earth and the sky and even us, because we are the end result of that battle. I'm just curious, when you say that there are not just parallels, but there's actual copying, looking at Genesis chapter 1 and 2, where the creation story is summarized in the Bible, what are the actual kind of parallels there that you're...
So let me explain what Wes is asking, because Billy's making the claim essentially that the Bible is copying from these other sources and documents. So Wes is asking, well, specifically in the creation narrative, that he's saying the Genesis account is copying from these other sources. And so Wes is challenging him on that. What are you referring to? What specifically is copied? Listen to this.
You're looking to, because as someone who's read both, I not only do I not find parallels, I actually, and this is the majority of ancient Near Eastern scholarship with me, think that Genesis chapter 1 is actually an apologetic against documents like the Enuma Elish. So what are the parallels there?
Separated the waters from the waters.
I do like what Wes just said, that Genesis seems to situate itself as actually an apologetic against the other gods, so-called gods. It would be strange to say that's the case and then also say, well, they're trying to copy them. And so notice what he says the parallel is.
For example, that's in the Enuma Elish, and that's also in the Bible.
Hold on, let me go back. Let me see if I can go back just so we hear that.
Actual kind of parallels there that you're looking to, because as someone who's read both, I not only do I not find parallels, I actually, and this is the majority.
Yo, shout out to Joel with the gifted. We gotta let you cook.
Let him cook. I said, let him cook.
Yeah, shout out to you. Appreciate it. Yeah, appreciate you. Hope you guys enjoy those memberships and enjoy the channel. By the way, if you're watching the video, make sure you give it a like, subscribe. If you're not subscribed, let's keep going.
Of ancient Near Eastern scholarship with me, think that Genesis chapter 1 is actually an apologetic against documents like the Enuma Elish. So what are the parallels there?
Separated the waters from the waters, for example.
So his big claim of how Genesis is being copied is separating the waters from the waters. That's how we know Genesis is being copied. I do like Wes's answer, so I'm going to just let him cook.
Well, that's in the Enuma Elish, and that's also in the biblical text.
Okay, that I would agree is a parallel. The only reason I highlight that is that if you're making this the argument, because if you brought it up, and I mean this will.
And let me just say this: a parallel doesn't mean a copying, right? We could all describe an event, and it doesn't mean we all copied one another, right? So, I mean, you would expect there to be some similarities, right? When describing certain things like creation. But that doesn't mean you copied somebody. And I'm going to let Wes give his answer because I thought it was really good.
The respect. There are superficial parallels, I would agree, the separation of the water, the concept of the earth being formless and void, that's also in the Enuma Elish. However, I think all the other details, it's the details that make the difference. And if we're looking at not the superficial crossovers, but the actual themes and concepts of what it's saying, you don't have a creation within 7 days.
The Bible's not going to take the Enuma Elish and put it into the biblical text. There are certain words that they utilize that let me know that they copied it from that text.
That's a presupposition. This is what you call a presupposition or an assumptive argument. Well, they use the same words, therefore it's a copy. That's absurd. That's an absurd argument. He's operating on a presupposition that he doesn't recognize. See, this is what I call, when someone is not epistemically aware. They're not epistemically self-aware of their own position and their presupposition and assumptions they're bringing forth to examine something historical, examine evidence. We all need to be epistemically self-aware of our presuppositions, our biases, and things like that. But Wes is going to challenge that.
Like, for example, separating the water from the waters, the void, the earth being void. That information is literally just copied over. So it tells you that somebody saw that and said, let me add it to this
assumption.
Book right here. Or let me add it to the scripture or this papyrus, because it wasn't a book yet at that time.
So was this text discovered that makes it parallel to Genesis? Was this like supposedly discovered prior to? I'm just curious.
It wasn't discovered prior to the Bible, but it dates back long before the Bible was ever written.
Oh, okay.
So let me just say this. So the reason why I say it's actually an apologetic against that is because the purpose of the Enuma Elish, which the Babylonians read every Babylonian New Year, was to point out the fact that the deities, and there's countless deities in the Babylonian pantheon, they actually come from the created order. So they're not outside of time and space. They actually come from the created order. And when they die in this battle, right, when Tiamat is defeated, the defeated gods become the earth and the sky and the plants and even you and me. And in that sense, the theme is that you don't actually have any purpose or end result. And you're not created in the image of God. In fact, in the ancient Babylonian system, only the kings were created in the image of God. And what we see that is counter to that is that even, sure, there's superficial, divided the waters, but we find that in almost every society and culture. That's not a parallel as much as it's just a generality. I would say what we see within the biblical account is that God purposefully creates. There's only one God. He purposefully creates. And
so Wes right now is showing, hey, there are similarities, but they're minute. There's similarities in like every religion, but it's the dissimilarities of that which kind of show, right, the issue at hand.
Then he creates and it's good. And it continues to say it's good 7 times. And then at the end of chapter 1, just for, the thick people in the original audience, it says, and then it was very good. And then he creates humanity, not kings, but simply the humans that he creates in God's image. And they have purpose and meaning, and that instills them with this creation order. And that's not what we find in the Enuma Elish. In fact, we find the opposite in the Enuma Elish, is that the created order is not good. It's a mistake. And that you are not created in the image of God. And there's a reminder that regular people are not created in the image of God. So linguistically, Hebrew does have Semitic ties with Akkadian. It doesn't with Sumerian. Sumerian is a language isolate, agglutinizing language. But I would say, just with all due respect, the parallels linguistically are not there. There might be superficial kind of concepts that are there, but they're so superficial that we can find them in everything. In the sense of, I'm in an office studio, you're in your office studio. That doesn't mean that, that we're the same people or we're even in the same place.
Yeah, this is a good point. A parallel doesn't mean exactness, right? Or, copied, right? They're both in offices. It doesn't mean, they're the same person or even in the same office, right? That's a good point right there.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, but I don't agree with that. I just see.
Yeah, but you have yet to prove your case. You just saying, I don't agree with that. Well, that's obvious. Yep. That's why you guys are having the discussion. But Wes is literally just, every argument you put forth so far that Wes was able to address has literally been destroyed. Like, if I was debating someone, I would just say, hey, look, man, you brought forth some valid points. I need to look further in some of these things, and maybe we can reconvene at another time. That would be a good answer, because it's not an admission that you're totally false, but it is a way out to say, hey, I will look into these things you brought forth. That would be a way more humble and more respectable way to say, look, I don't know what I'm talking about. Right? I think we should be able to accept that. Like, you got in a conversation that was way over your head, and now that you're here, you're like, I need to step back. That would be something I would do if I got into a conversation where I was like, hey, I don't know some of the things you're referring to, but if you give me time, I'll look into them. And maybe then we can have a conversation. I think that would be a respectable answer for anyone.
If I have all these texts out, there's a lot of different information that you can see. There's a lot of it's been copied word for word into the biblical text.
Yeah, but you haven't proven that. You keep just making an assertion, right? We talked about this before. Mere assertion, right? Mere assertion. Shout out to Daniel Starr, man, with the gifted 5 memberships. Man, they blessing y'all today in the chat. Hey, maybe by the end of this, we'll raise our 50K and maybe I could throw my hat in the ring with Billy. Man, I would never waste 50K like that.
But what's the word
in your version of what you believe in, you keep saying that God's a he.
Yep.
And so where do you get that from?
Throughout both the Hebrew Old Testament and the Greek New Testament, you have the masculine singular pronoun used for God.
And why is God a man? Where's the evidence of this?
Well, God isn't a man. See, within historical Christianity, we don't.
One of the things Billy just kind of demonstrates his ignorance of the Bible so much when he speaks about the Bible. Yeah, God is not a man. But I like Wes's answer. I'm going to let him talk about it.
Believe that God has a gender. However, the way that he has decided to reveal himself is through the masculine plural, and then ultimately by becoming a human in the person of Jesus Christ. So we don't believe that God has a gender. In fact, the fact that God creates humanity in his image and he creates them male and female, those are two aspects of the image of God. And so that's the completeness. So historical Christianity has never argued that God is gendered. Jesus is gendered in the sense that during the incarnation, he becomes a human man, but he's still fully man and fully God. But God is spirit. And right, as the scripture says, we worship him in spirit and in truth. And but nobody's arguing that. What's that? Sorry?
That always blows my mind.
God is the same all the time, right? He's always good. God is all the same all the time. Right?
Yeah, but we do see that in scripture, God has revealed himself through the masculine plural. And there are aspects of God's character that we see within scripture that do actually communicate. Jesus says that he longs to gather Israel like a mother hen collects her chicks. So we see aspects of the feminine of God, not meaning that God is feminine, but that the image of God reflects both the masculine and the feminine. And that's why when, the two become one flesh, there's a uniting of that reflects the image of God as well.
Do you believe that the majority of marriage? Do you actually believe that the majority of Christians really believe that God is not masculine, that God has both aspects?
Yes, I do. But I actually like Wes's answer better. So I'm going to play it in a second. But I can say this, and I'm not counting like Hebrew Israelites, Mormons, cultic groups, right? majority of Orthodox Christians I can maybe count on my one hand of people who tried to make some kind of argument of God having a body, and then, you know, the rest of their theology is still kind of good. I've seriously, like, it's generally like of outside orthodoxy people making some kind of argument for God having a physical body, like male genitalia and everything like that, right? Like, they would be in the very minority group. The vast majority of people believe, yeah, God is spirit. But I do like Wes's answer. Listen to it.
If you,
I mean, it's irrelevant what the majority of Christians believe. On the road,
how many would tell you, you know, that God's not a man? They've never been taught this.
Never been taught this.
Well, I was taught it growing up. I was taught it in when I was a child, when I went to seminary, when I went to Bible college. I was taught it in graduate school. I would say I would say a few things to that. I would say, in one sense, it's irrelevant what the majority of Christians believe.
Exactly.
Because what historical biblical Christianity articulates is what they should believe. You know, there are Christians who run around saying all sorts of things that are not in conformity to biblical, historical, Orthodox Christianity.
Exactly.
And they shouldn't believe that because it's irrelevant. And so if one Christian believes something that is not in line with biblical Christianity, I mean, that's on them. So God is not gendered, but he does express through inspired scripture the masculine the masculine pronoun.
That's pretty convenient. I mean, for an all-knowing, all-loving God to understand that human beings are going to take that and abuse it to put their boot on the neck of women for eons.
What is this? Dude is just throwing everything in the kitchen sink. My goodness.
How dare you?
You went from talking about is God a male to he's like, no. And then he talk about, well, that's pretty convenient given he putting foot on the neck of, what does this have to do with anything? This Billy is not a rational person that should be taken serious. He is Terrence Howard level crazy, and makes sense that they're good friends.
Pretty interesting. Also, I'm trying to understand.
Yeah, I mean, so hold on. Let me speak to that
because it is something there real quick, guys. I have to.
Yeah, sure.
No, we're gonna get past what he said because it's literally not at any point relevant.
So
yeah, because all he does was like, well, he just this guy sounds like your modern evangelical, unfortunately, where it's just the relationship and I don't want to care about all these other things. Old Testament, yeah, whatever. You know, I just want that Jesus, right? That's kind of all he's about to say. So let me just go past that. I mean, he literally talks for like 7 minutes straight. No lie.
And all these people.
Let me keep going. What are you?
That human beings.
Maybe longer than that. My goodness.
Carrying these huge.
Man, it's probably like 10 minutes straight.
Written by a friend of.
All right, let me. Here we go.
Yeah, I mean, there's a really great resource written by a friend of mine, John Dixon. It's a book called Bullies and Saints, where he goes through a lot of the instances of we're obviously going to find abuses, and every human being is going to find a way to exploit whatever is presented to them. So, in one sense, I think we can say, you know, isn't it convenient that God used the masculine plural pronoun? The masculine pronoun. I keep saying plural. It's just a mistake. The masculine pronoun. And we can say, oh, sure, that's convenient. Maybe, but it is how he has revealed himself to us. And it's not his fault if we abuse that. I mean, we could say, so I grew up in the Middle East. My parents worked in Amman, Jordan. And when I was living in the Middle East, there was a country called the Democratic Republic of Iraq. Now, just because democracy exists and people are going to name things democratic when they obviously aren't, doesn't mean we then judge democracy. I mean, think of the Democratic Republic of North Korea, right? Nobody thinks that that's an actual representation of democracy. So people.
So what Wes is doing, because Billy tried to say, well, if people misrepresent the Bible, that's a onus on God's character. If God, that means God is weak. That's an absurd argument. If I take a car manual and I don't know how to read it and I mess up something in the engine, that's not a fault with Ford or Toyota. That's shows my ineptitude. It's as I would say, Billy's arguments are literally childish and sophomoric. I mean, to call it sophomoric is actually a compliment.
Always going to abuse terms and ideas and concepts. The difference is, though, I think historically within Judeo-Christianity, you have this ethic that we were talking about before that I think is fundamentally different than what we find in things like the Enuma Elish, the Atrasis, and other things, in that we are created in the image of God. And actually, one of the earliest criticisms of Christianity are by individuals like Celsus, who is a Greco-Roman philosopher in the 2nd century, where he accused Christianity of being foolish, dishonorable, and stupid, and he called it the religion of slaves, women, and children. Why? Not because God used the masculine pronoun for himself and people were abusing that, because the concept that Christians believed in of everybody, no matter what your gender, your race, your social standing, Paul says in Christ there is no slave nor free, there is no Jew nor Gentile, there is no Scythian or barbarian, there's no male nor female. These things united people. And we can see there's a historian named Rodney Stark. And in his...
I do like that. So what Wes is trying to say is the very argument that Billy is raising is actually demonstrated by the opponents of Christianity in the early couple centuries of why they thought Christianity was weak, is because they weren't just going after nobility. I mean, Paul actually uses that argument in 1 Corinthians 1, right? Where is the weak? Where is the wise one? Where is the scribe? Where is the debater of his age, right? God uses the weak things to shame the wise. It's just amazing. This is very amazing.
Book, The Rise of Christianity, he actually says that you can track empirically the agency of women across the ancient world by the movement of Christianity. So that, in other words, whenever an area became populated by Christians, we see a direct correlation with the privileges and treatments of women that expand in time when the surrounding culture largely didn't view women as being fully human. So I think we're always going to have abuses, but if there's one worldview that exists that gives agency to people and says that everybody has worth by nature of being just human, it's the Christian worldview. And that's where I think it's very different. So we can argue about why we think God should or shouldn't have revealed himself in his pronouns, but I think that's actually irrespective of the historical reality that we see within the impact of Christianity, particularly on the West, but around the world, and how it gives agency to the marginalized.
Wes, can I ask you one? So when because I'm always interested in this, like you were raised Christian. I always think about this, like my wife who's Muslim, and our beliefs at the core are so similar, but there's some differences. And I wonder, like, if I was born in Sierra Leone, West Africa, where she was, I know in the Bible says Christ revealed, but C.S. Lewis is someone that I really respect, because I'm
sorry, I'm not big of a C.S. Lewis fan as many people are. Theologically, he had issues, and he's about to demonstrate one of them.
I'm an entrepreneur. I'm a think outside the box, always, and we should be. No one should just be like sheep and follow what any of us are saying. Like, do your research on your own with everything, of course. But what led you, sorry, going back to C.S. Lewis real quick. He was a famous scholar who was once an atheist, set out on a journey to basically disprove the Bible. As he went to do that, he himself found out that to be like one of the most historically accurate written books, which really shocked him. He then became a Christian after that. He's done the Narnia movies, Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe.
Yeah, I don't know how he's a moderator. I mean, it's like a 2-on-1 debate, but really much of what he says doesn't mean anything. So I'm just going to fast forward it because, again, he doesn't really say anything of use. I'm not trying to be insulting, but hold on.
Am I making sense?
Finally, 3 minutes later. This is a long question, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up in a bit of an unusual household in that my mom grew up in India, and my parents, when I was younger, I was born in Pakistan, and I spent a portion of my childhood in Jordan. I grew up in majority Muslim countries and surrounded by majority Muslim environments. And we had, a copy of the Quran in the room. In fact, we had the Bhagavad Gita and the Book of Mormon, and for a little while, other documents in our house. These were things that my parents, although they never verbally said, these Christianity is true, therefore these are not forbidden. These are not verboten. The truth, capital T truth, of the reality of the world that we hold can stand up against scrutiny and investigation. And I did do a great deal of that as a kid. My dad is a historian as well. He has a doctorate, and I grew up on him, reading the rise and fall of the Roman Empire. But at the exact same time, the reason why I actually went to university with full intention of going into the police force.
Oh, wow.
But it was interactions with Muslims and Mormons and Jehovah's Witnesses and atheists and accusations against the credibility of the Bible, which actually piqued my interest, because they would say things that I said that I thought, if that's true, of course that undermines what I believe. I believe that Jesus is God incarnate. If I can't trust the Gospels as reliable first century eyewitness testimony, then I might as well throw all of this away, because I'm not going to believe a lie, even if it's a convenient lie. And so it was actually the exploration of eventually going into graduate college and then now in working on my PhD, the largest secular university in Canada, that got me thinking, okay, how do we investigate these things? What are the methodologies by which we go about to explore the origins and credibility of something like the Bible? And that investigation, with all due respect to Billy and the content that you put out, has actually confirmed what I believe. I'm dealing with the actual manuscripts.
I love that line. I'm dealing with the actual manuscripts. It's like a shot. No shade, Billy, but you're not. You're not really dealing with the actual manuscripts. Wes is like, I study this for a living. Billy just looks up means in ChatGPT stuff.
Travel to academic institutions, to other countries, and I look at these things and I read them. And it's a privilege to be able to learn languages like Greek and Coptic and Hebrew and Aramaic and dig into these things. And I think ultimately, I really appreciate what you said there, Mark, with your articulation of your personal relationship. And I think that's so important. But I think it's also important to remember that that relationship is based on something that's real and verifiable. And we can look into the evidence. I have friends who are linguists, philologists, and historians. And when we look into these things and we talk with one another and we're discussing, we're constantly trying to falsify our theories, because that's what good history does. We're looking for the falsification. You don't go in, ideally, if you want to be a good historian, with trying to prove your original thesis. You go in and say, okay, what are the avenues that actually could disprove this? And then how do we engage with those in an appropriate and articulate manner? So what I believe is true, but I believe it based on the evidence of the actual documentation. I've read a lot of the literature that you're talking about, Billy, the Enuma Elish, the Atrahasis, the Bhagavad Gita, the Epic of Gilgamesh, and I've read some of them in their original languages because I've tried to be a good historian and go back into the primary sources. Or if I can't, engage with people like my friends who are Assyriologists, who are philologists, and try to not just go off of a translation, but the original. And I think I found largely the opposite of the conclusions that you have made, Billy. And I know that you are very passionate about what you talk about, and I respect that. I just think that the confidence might not actually be backed up by the reality of the evidence. So when we're looking at something like the Sinai Bible.
I love that line. Your confidence is not backed up by the evidence. That's such a great line. Billy is very confident. He says things with great authority in his tone, right? Christians are in a cult, right? Jesus did not die on the cross, right? He says these things with great confidence. But again, as Wes just said, it's not backed up by actual evidence.
We're looking at something like the Gospel of Barnabas, when we're looking at something like the Gospel of Jesus' wife. These are things that actually have provenance that we can verify. And ultimately, I think the answers to the questions of the legitimacy or the illegitimacy of those things point to not just a different conclusion, but actually the opposite conclusion, and that Christianity is true.
Well, now I'm glad you said that. So those three topics.
I'm glad you said that. I'm glad you just been destroying my worldview. How long it's been going for 50 minutes. I'm glad you've been destroying my world for the last 52 minutes, right?
They're a very small piece of my concept and idea of what really happened in the ancient past. So that's a very small fraction. I mean, that's less than 0.1%. You talk about eyewitness accounts. It's convinced you that Christianity is real. There's been eyewitness accounts of every culture that I've visited around this entire planet, and their eyewitness accounts of what they experienced is 100,000% opposite of what's in the Bible. People have.
What do you mean? Can you give me an example?
The Dogon tribe, for example, in Mali, Africa, they experienced a culture that they claim came to this planet from Sirius B. They have the evidence that they knew these beings were from Sirius B because they have the instruments that show the orbit of a trinary star system that we couldn't discover until the 1970s with our modern technology. Okay, they understood not only the orbital pattern of Sirius A, B, and C, but even that B was a failed star, which you can't see it from Earth with the naked eye. They knew that it was a white dwarf. They even knew that they said that if you took a tablespoon of it, the entire tribe or 1,000 men could.
One of the problems with conversing with Billy is you ask him a question, and by the time you get to the end of the answer, you don't even know what question you asked. I want you to guys try to remember the question. I've already forgot. Okay, I remember. He's asking what eyewitnesses. There we go. What eyewitnesses contradict the Bible from other, I guess, religions and he just goes on a tangent.
Lift the tablespoon. They understood mass and gravity as well. They were told the shape, the sizes, and the colors of all the planets in our solar system, which they recorded. And there's only one wisdom keeper, and that person can never be touched by a person. If they get touched by another person, they'd actually be killed. And then they eventually have a mentee that they break down that verbally handed down knowledge to. And that next person then takes over and becomes the wisdom keeper. And they've been doing this for thousands and thousands of years. And science, modern science, has found all their information to be 1,000% accurate. Then you have the Hopi tribe of the Americas, indigenous tribes, Hopi tribe, Lakota tribe, also having engagements with these quote unquote star brothers, even having an account of them being taken underground, which you don't see just only in America. I just came back from Turkey. You have the people from Turkey and Mesopotamia.
Man, there's no way this man ain't did shrooms. There ain't no way.
Boy, ain't no way, boy. Boy, ain't no way, boy.
There ain't no way. Billy don't do drugs. There's actually a real, like a scientist. I think I heard of a paper being released for the use of psychedelics in like scholarship. He's like a professor and released a paper on how it can be good for you. Like if you do it in a minimal take, right? That's kind of his art. Don't overindulge, right? I think Billy might have read that paper. That's all I'm saying.
Also being taken underground into a place called Derinkuyu by these beings, by these people, a structure that's built 12 stories deep underground that's made out of volcanic tuff, a very soft stone. And if you don't know what you're doing, it'll actually collapse. There's no evidence of any collapse. And it was thousands of years old. It was reused many times.
But Christianity is crazy.
What'd you say now, Chuck?
Christianity is crazy and absurd. Go off, Billy. Go off.
The mainstream story about what it was used for to hide from Romans is actually false. This place is ancient. And in order to build it, you actually have to have...
I was watching this debate this morning. I was like, maybe Billy has been visited by some strange foreign people. I don't know if they're aliens, but they're strange and foreign, all right.
Foreknowledge of how to construct this type of an underground civilization that can hold 20 to 30,000 people, places for livestock, places for worship, with no sign of collapse. Then you have to have hundreds of ventilation shafts. And I've been down there. Those ventilation shafts cut through solid rock all the way down to the core. And there's even more.
Do y'all remember the question? I told you, you're going to have a hard time remembering the question by the time Billy get done answering.
It links to other underground cities that are miles and miles away. As you get to the very base of this area, you can cut through and go to another location. But again, these people were taken under. Also, then you have the ancient Egyptians. Similar story. Major catastrophe comes. These people come and take them underground.
Yeah, he been downstairs, all right. Him downstairs. Yeah, he been downstairs.
Then you have the information in the Egyptian book of Going Forth by Day. More accounts by people, our ancestors, that have accounts that do not match up with the biblical text. And so all of a sudden we're saying that all these cultures, the Aboriginal people, I can go into them as well. I've gone for walkabouts in Outback, in the Outback.
You've
And
been in
the
them
Aboriginal
tunnels,
elders,
man.
same thing. They were seated here by Pleiadians. This is their verbal handed down history for thousands of years. And I can go around the world and I can come up with all this information from all these eyewitness accounts from people that should be respected, dignified, and shouldn't be.
If they saying all this, bro, you get no respect from me. You get none. No respect, bro. I don't even like what you just said. Don't make no sense.
Oft, and that we're now saying that all this information that they put forward, all their verbal handed down history, all their written history, that's got to go to the side because this one text is 1,000% accurate.
Sure, but so my question is, most of that is oral history, correct?
Oh, it's all oral history, even the Bible.
Okay, so when we're engaging,
Wait a second. He said it's all oral history, even the Bible. This dude was literally giving manuscripts of the Bible. I mean, what was Paul writing? What was Peter writing? What is Jeremiah writing? He said it's all oral history. This guy, that's why I'm saying, man, he loses his credibility every time he talks.
with oral history, what methodologies are you using to confirm that the orality is accurate?
Oh, man. Well, first and foremost, some of these texts are, some of these cultures have written down.
So let me explain the question. Wes is asking, what's your method to arrive to these facts? Right? How do you examine, how do you go about coming to an analysis, and what's your method of coming to these things? Right?
Information in caves. You've got cave paintings. The Dogon tribe actually have not only written down.
Sure.
In
No,
caves,
I don't disagree with that. The question is one of
the
historic.
tools that show
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you there. The question is one of methodological analysis. So you have to have a method by which you can find either that something is false.
Look at Wes graciously schooling him. No. Here's how you come to this is how you examine it. Now, how you go about it. I mean, Wes is so gracious.
Justifiable, or that there are avenues by which you can show internal and external accuracy of credibility. So this is what we do with documents. This is what we do with the ancient gospels. This is how real scholars, I'm not making fun of Wes, but this is how real scholars, come to facts and certainty and high probability and propositional truths on certain data we come to, But Billy don't know what he's talking about. I've worked on Xenophon and Plutarch, and we look at the internal evidences and the external multivalent corroboration to try to figure out, okay, yes, we have all these stories. Great. I don't deny that. But as a historian, as someone who's trying to figure out what is accurate, how do you know if I use the term verisimilitude, do you know what that term means?
No, but I can tell you this. Tell me how the Dogon tribe saw Sirius B, knew the orbit of Sirius B, a trinary star system, accurately, and can show you the orbit with a special tool that they made that was given to them by these people. How do they know the shapes, the sizes, the colors, and the orbital pattern of all these planets in our solar system and other star alignments that they would use to have something called the Ziggy and planet and their own harvesting and planting and so forth and so on? That's not enough evidence that there's something.
Well, I'm not aware of that particular case. And even, I would grant that, the ancient people are far more technological advanced than we give themselves credit for. Just because they're ancient doesn't mean they're stupid. I am well aware, as someone who has done both investigation of the past and done archaeological analysis, that is a reality. My question is simply, okay, you have these stories or you have these accounts, you're referring to them as eyewitness testimony. How are you going about verifying that as that?
Well, if the people had eyewitness testimony about Jesus, they then just wrote down their eyewitness testimony on a piece of paper or parchment paper or papyrus. So these people...
Right. So that's where internal methodological analysis...
Some of it's actually written down. So, it's the same exact thing. There's really no difference.
Wait a second. He just said it was all oral. Now he's just saying some of it is written down. This guy's confusing.
Well, no. So you do internal investigations to figure out when something was dated. So something like So when I used that term verisimilitude before, that's something we as historians are looking for. It's a term that simply means the appearance or likelihood of truthfulness. So when you do historical analysis, it's an inference to the best explanation. So you have proof and you have data, and you're extrapolating that data on levels of probability. So some things can be confirmed as high probabilistically true, and other things are lower in their probability that they happened. But there are different methodologies, different ways that you explore historically how that happens.
Well,
so for the Gospels, we look at...
That was with the Dogon tribe. Scientists went there to visit the tribe, and they still have no answers because they used their modern science. They took the best scholars to visit these people, and they're still scratching their heads. Something happened there.
Sure. And I'm not even denying that necessarily, but the question is, okay, we need different levels of evidence and exploration, not just scientifically, but historically, to derive something as eyewitness testimony. Now, we have mountains of that, and I'm more than willing to go into some of that with the Gospels as early eyewitness testimony that can be verified externally and internally. But nonetheless, the only reason I ask, Billy, is because I've listened to a fair amount of your content, and I'm unaware of the methods that you use to try to discern between what is an accurate source historiographically and an inaccurate source historiographically.
Well,
Does that make sense?
I use getting in an airplane and traveling to these places, doing my own research, talking with the indigenous cultures, and researching as much of the text that is available.
This is a silly answer. This is a silly answer. He's like, hey, how do you come to certain conclusions based on what I'm referring to? He's like, I get in a plane, I do my own research. It's like, that's wild. Because the appeal is just, that's not a method necessarily that can be verified and tested. Like, give your analysis on how you check the data. Okay, you get in a plane and go fly places and do your own research. But we see where your own research has led you. It's led you to quoting fraudulent sources like the Gospel of Barnabas. So something else, sir, because that plane ain't working. that plane only got one wing, bro.
I can possibly find.
Okay, so I don't dispute that, and I do believe you have done that. But even from what we've talked about, so you've researched the text, but when we talked about the crucifixion, everything you cited was either, and with all due respect, false in terms of the Sinai Bible, because exactly. Codex Sinaiticus is just a 4th century Greek manuscript of the Gospels that we have today, or they were verified forgeries in terms of the Gospel of Jesus' wife.
You might be right.
Yeah, I like what Lauren says. You can travel anywhere and ask the wrong question and use insufficient techniques. Yeah, the fact that you flowed somewhere and did your own research doesn't actually mean you're right. And Wes is like, okay, well, every source you've used today has been fraudulent. And Billy says, yes, you might be right.
You may be right.
No, he is right. You even granted, yeah, okay. Hey, you even granted it earlier. Now you're like, you may be right, sir.
On that particular part of the topic. But like I said, that's less than 0.1% of the information that I hold.
Sure. But you started the debate off denying the resurrection and quoting this source. So give us another source. Since it's 1/10 of all the information you use, you've already demonstrated. Here's one thing I like to do. When you're having a debate with someone, bring out your strongest arguments first. Because don't bring out your weakest ones. And when those get chopped up, say, well, I didn't bring my strongest information to the debate. Well, that's your fault. Start with your strongest, and then you can have less probable arguments you can bring to the table. But don't start with your lowest, and then when that gets chopped up, just say, well, I'm only dealing with 1/10 of my data I have. Okay.
That was the original question. So yeah. So that's what I'm saying. I'm saying, okay, well, so I'm going off of what we've already talked about. So you've said you explore the text. I don't deny that. But the evidence, by going off of what you have put forward in terms of the actual documentary evidence, is not just less than convincing in my respect. And I mean this with respect, because I think you have done a lot of research. You've traveled to these places. I have too. Like, this is what I do as my career. But I'm not really getting indication, because in history, we go to the primary sources. in their primary languages. And when Mark asked, okay, why do you deny the crucifixion? The sources you used were not primary.
Okay, we're still talking about the same thing over and over again. There's so much more we can talk about here. We're wasting a lot of time.
Here's why it's so important, because Billy doesn't see this as important. He's like, oh, we're just talking about the same thing, and we're just wasting time. This is the basis of and foundation of your argument for the claim you're making. So yes, Wes is spending a lot of time on that to show how wrong you are. I mean, Billy doesn't see that. That's why I say he's epistemically not a self-aware person.
So much more. That's this amount.
Do you guys
so much
think
more stuff to talk about?
Do you think that all these different cultures and stuff describing these other beings, could those have been? I'm not an expert theologian or whatever, but like where it talks about.
I'm going to fast forward to him because
I'm not.
He doesn't say much of anything that's of relevant.
Okay, whatever that means.
Hold on, let me.
He comes down and he teaches.
Where is that in the Book of Enoch?
Oh, okay, this is an interesting point.
All these different cultures and stuff describing.
Hold on,
like this is what I do as my career, but I'm not really getting indication because in history we go to the primary sources in their primary languages. And when Mark asked, okay, why do you deny the crucifixion? The sources you used were not primary.
Okay, we're still talking about the same thing over and over again. There's so much more we can talk about here. We're wasting.
Oh, wait, I went too far back. Hold on. Let's see.
Because there are two Enochs, first Enoch and second Enoch.
Okay.
Azazel coming down in the Book of Enoch, coming down, and the first thing he does is teach people how to make knives and swords so they can cut a man's head off. You read, you see these quote unquote.
Where's that in the Book of Enoch?
In the Book of Enoch, Azazel. He comes down and he teaches.
Where is that in the Book of Enoch? The only reason I ask is because there are two Enochs, first Enoch and second Enoch, and only first Enoch is an actual historical amalgamation.
Okay. And then you analyze the fact that these angels are having sex, they're getting drunk. These are just people.
Whoa. Where are angels getting drunk?
Watch this.
Angels party, they go, they hang out with people, they go to war with people, they put on their outfits and they go to war with people. This is in the Bible.
Where are they getting drunk though?
Well, they get married, okay? Whatever that means.
So apparently getting married is getting drunk. He's like, this is in the Bible. Where is that in the Bible? But watch this.
But they're having a good time.
Married.
Okay.
He's saying they're getting. Didn't it sound like he said they get married? It sounded like that to me. But watch his clarification.
Not married.
In fact, Scripture says that angels can't get married.
Merry Christmas.
Not married. Mary.
Yeah, Mary like jolly. They get married. Being married doesn't mean necessarily you got drunk. So a Merry Christmas, they don't mean drunk Christmas, right? This is the level of argumentation this man really presented.
Merry. But the point that I'm making here is when you start to really analyze what these angels are doing, and you start to analyze how many people are dying in the biblical text, you start to say, well, how many people did Satan actually kill? And when you start doing the tally on the numbers, God's doing most of the killing in the Bible. It's not.
Let me shock you with something. Everybody's life is in the hands of God. It's not a murder. God, being the author of life, has the authority to end his creation's life at any point he chooses. So what's your point? God takes life. Yes, okay. He also begins life. What's your point? What is your point? This man is throwing everything in the kitchen sink. He wants something to stick, but it ain't sticking.
The devil that's doing all the killing. And then God says in Isaiah, I created the good and I created the evil. Do what I say at the Lord. So he's saying that he's doing the good and the evil. That's what he's saying. Yeah. Now, my personal.
Oh, shout out to Elisha. Said Billy has no time to waste. He got to park David Carr's car before the Marvel service. For sure. Oh, yeah.
Opinion on this whole thing. I just let me get this out because we keep going over the same.
Oh, and shout out to Blake always coming through.
Let him cook. I said, let him cook.
Man, we've had like 20 memberships today. Yo, shout out to y'all.
Rhetoric over and over again. My personal opinion is that the biblical text is a good book. Like I've said, I've got videos. My number one video on Twitter has me saying this. It's good text because if you actually apply some of the information that's in the Bible, you can get a good result, like you have done, Mark.
Right. I struggle with no, I want you to finish your thought. Go ahead.
Yeah. So because you can get a good result, but there's a lot of misinformation in the Bible. There's a lot of false information that's copied from ancient text. And if
he hasn't demonstrated one scintilla of that claim. I mean, an hour in, Billy hasn't demonstrated anything he's standing on. This man's standing on straw.
You go by that text, all of a sudden you end up with 400 years of slavery. You end up with abuse. You end up with divide and conquer tactics that separate people. You end up with people thinking that they're the chosen ones and they're the chosen people. And we've been promised this promised land so we can eradicate another race of people because this is our land, because God promised it to us. You have people that want to go on the papal.
I mean, that's what the Bible says. Bro, Billy, just say you don't like the Bible.
Inquisitions and torture and kill and murder over 80 million people. You have the American Holocaust, 111 million indigenous natives slayed. You have all this going on because of this text, which is set up so contradictory throughout its path across time. You get into the New Testament, slavery is still being condoned.
Boy, ain't no way, boy. Boy, ain't no way, boy.
Anybody who says that doesn't know what they're talking about. Doesn't know what they're talking about. He loves to bring this up, and this is like the atheist kind of, I mean, he got this off the atheist starter kit packet, right? That's exactly what this is. Literally, Paul says if you can gain your freedom, do so. Matter of fact, Paul actually condones slave masters to treat their slaves well. Doesn't sound like God is trying to abuse everybody and beat them and murder, pillage, right? Okay.
New Testament.
Was it?
Honor thy slave master as you would honor God or Jesus, it says, I believe. So in Ephesians.
I always thought but the God of the Old Testament too. Like I'll let you go real quick.
Yeah, Wes wants to address that so bad. But again, the host is really about to just pile on and literally agree with Billy. I'm just going to skip past it. Let me get here.
Obey Christ. That's slaves. Obey your earthly masters with respect and fear with sincerity in your heart, just as you would obey Christ. So it does say that.
That is not saying slavery is okay. What you have in the Bible is not the apostle, and I would even go further, God himself wanting to create this chaos, right? We're not BLM where we're just going out in the streets, no justice, no peace. That's not. We win them with compelling behavior and arguments, not destruction, right? So yes, that doesn't mean therefore slavery is okay. Just like, I mean, the government, right? Paul says to submit to government, even bad ones. It's not a justification for bad government. This is why it's frustrating to listen to Billy just throw these so bad arguments out there, man. I mean, like when I was year one in the faith, I could address this sufficiently.
Ephesians 6:5, but there's so many aspects.
That stuff is what.
And what is the context of what Ephesians is saying? So I think this is very important.
Yeah, this is the sad part. Shout out to Elisha. Sad part is Billy's theology will be accepted in some churches. The sad part is that some Christians are influenced by Billy and like, man, he's such a brilliant guy and I've left the faith because of him. And if you leave the faith because of Billy, you are already on shaky foundation. I'm going to say that. This guy literally has nothing.
Is that we don't take text in isolation. So within Scripture, and this is why all the abolition movements throughout history have only been Judeo-Christian movements. There's never been an abolition movement that wasn't Christian. And actually, there's the recent work by historian Tom Holland, not the Spider-Man actor, different Tom Holland, but his recent Dominion highlights this fact very well. This is not a Christian, but in it, he shows that going right back into the antiquity with the Cappadocian Fathers was the first abolition movement. and then into, the British and the American abolition movements, these were fundamentally Christian movements run by Christians, because of the idea that when Paul, who wrote that letter to Ephesians, says, in Christ there is no slave nor free, he's breaking down those barriers. So in Ephesians, when he says, slaves obey your masters, he's operating on the socioeconomic context of what he's going on. Exactly. And he's saying, hey, we have slaves and we have free people, okay? If you're a believing slave, if you're a slave who believes in Jesus as the Messiah, don't be equitable in how you are living your life. Right. Reflect Christ accurately. That's right. And that's a movement that he is fundamentally working towards, that eventually starts to completely take out the legs.
This is where we would argue, Wes. I would be. I love. By the way, I love that we're all. This is respectful. I don't feel.
Now again, Wes just destroyed what Billy just said. Now. And one thing you have with the moderator, he gives so many escape routes to Billy. Billy's like on the ropes, right? And Wes is coming in with the haymaker, and the host is like, hey, I love pizza. Don't you guys love pizza? It's like he just comes up with something just so irrelevant. It's just kind of like distracting from the heart of the conversation. As a moderator, he should have just stayed out of it unless there was either a clarifying question, some kind of what do you call it? Maybe, directing to a sufficient point, but he's like trying to get in on the debate, right? Shout out to Elisha again, says, yo, K-Dub, the False Teacher of the Year award is getting heated as the year closed. Mike Todd has some good comp this year. Hey, we're going to get it in, right? This year has been a wild year, to say the least, but yeah.
This is all just three grown-ups talking in a healthy way.
I appreciate this.
And I think this is going to give us but this is where you and I sitting.
Let me skip past it because again, most of what he said was just
those things seem to just get so.
Let's see.
Jesus came, and things need to be.
Let's see. Because again, what he says is just kind of like, I feel Jesus in my heart, and good person. That's kind of like what all he says.
It's perplexing to God of all wisdom, which
let me see.
Knowing I'm a God who created the whole.
Let's see. Let me get to.
Where does that correlate?
He's not speaking to prostitutes. He's talking about purity, and he's talking in the context of when he says, don't adorn yourself with jewelry. The original audience, and we can explore this by.
But do you just realize how dumb that sounds? Saying the original audience, then.
Do you realize how dumb that sounds? Saying the original audience, who the author Peter is speaking to, because he brought up this thing about jewelry, right? And what the host is trying to say, this guy claims to be a Christian. He's trying to say, the Bible's inconsistent. I mean, I don't know why you're a Christian if you really believe that. Either you need to be, discipled, or you just need to be real and be honest and just say, look, I don't believe what the Bible teaches. But here Wes is trying to answer his question by appealing to the original audience. How dare him? But unfortunately, we think the Bible, and many people treat the Bible, as this perspectival method where we can situate it to ourselves and ignore the original audience. So when someone starts appealing to the original audience, we think they're loony. But this is how you do actual critical textual work of exegesis and understanding background and things like that. Wes is appealing to the background, and the guy's like, don't you hear how dumb that sounds? Sir, get out of here.
You're on saying, but now it's okay for this audience because these women and stuff don't. Because I'm just saying, like, I get why people, like, if we're going to, we got to be open-minded. We're punching holes in other stuff.
No, we do not need to be open-minded to falsehood. I am not open-minded. I am very close-minded. I don't let anything just come in my mind, especially not false ideologies. You guys don't do that with your front door. Just leave your front door open. Hey, whatever comes in, comes in. Lions, tigers, and bears, you'll die, right? Right? You don't sleep with your front door open. Why would I have my mind, which is way more precious to me than actually my house? That stuff can be replaced, right? Oh, man.
to punch holes in our own. And even if it's agreeing, like don't you think that's a little, I get what you're saying. Like if prostitutes right now, if prostitutes all wear a red band around their neck and that signals what all prostitutes are, and it's like, don't wear that.
Prostitutes have tattoos, and a lot of women who aren't prostitutes have tattoos.
Right. I don't think it's this black and white that only the prostitute, and also you're only talking about in one little town. So my bigger question would be to God.
Well, in Greco-Roman antiquity,
like, why did you put that in the Bible?
So
that just confuses everyone, though.
Here's sometimes what people do. They take their confusion, they confused about a passage, and then they say, therefore, the Bible is confusing. Sir, you being confused by ignoring the passage, ignoring the historical data, the background, the context, the pericope at hand, is not an argument against the Bible. Again, if I pick up a manual on anything, car, anything, and I don't understand it, that's not necessarily my fault. Necessarily. Especially when a lot of people are understanding it. You know, Carlos Rodriguez with the super says we can leave door open with power. Even the Caucasians. It's not, no. It's not Caucasians. It's Caucasians. Right. You got to get that difference in there. Right. So again, your confusion about the Bible does not mean the Bible is confusing. Hope that makes sense.
Because all these other civilizations are going to be reading that.
We have something we keep saying here. God didn't put that in the Bible. Men put this stuff in the Bible.
And I think that was some of the old. I'm telling you.
So I guess this is the part where Wes drops out. But again, Billy denies the inspiration of Scripture. Well, I expect him to do so. That he denies that the Bible is inspired by God. I expect him to. He has no actual argument. Because remember, all the things he brought up, slavery, the textual data, the resurrection not being original by appealing to fraudulent sources, everything he's appealed to, he has no basis for the claims he's making.
Billy, it's for me. I think he'll get back. If it wasn't for Jesus. Sorry, we got you back on, Wes.
Yeah. I understand what you're saying, Mark, but what I'm saying is I think we're missing a big point here. The point that I'm trying to make here is that the Bible is written by people, men.
That's what the Bible says. You know, when anybody ever makes that point, I'm showing them how they don't understand the Bible's claim. The Bible does not deny it was written by man, but it was written by man, inspired through God, right? God is the ultimate inspirer. Of course, the Bible was written by man. That's what the Bible says. Inspired by the Spirit. So whenever someone says that, you're like, the Bible was written by man. Okay. Okay, what's your point? What they're trying to argue, let me remember, I have my PhD in foolishness. I've been around the block a little bit, right? I'm not Jenny, but I've been around the block. What they're trying to argue is that the Bible was written by man. Therefore, you shouldn't trust it. Okay? But a man said that, and I should trust it? You see, everything you're going to say is going to be given by a man or, written by a man. Right? But Benny wants you to pay $50K to hear him debate. That was done by a man. You see, it ain't real. The logic ain't logicking all the way through that circle, through the Christ consciousness he wants to appeal to.
Men who are extremely flawed. And the evidence of that is what they did, what they took the information that's in that biblical text and what they did with it globally to other human beings, and how they even wrote about it in the Bible, how they enslaved and tortured people.
But by the way, this whole debate, he's been appealing to things that have been written by man.
What'd you say, now, Chuck?
So by his own logic, he has no ground to stand on, since he's been quoting documents that are flawed, that cannot be trusted. Right?
In the biblical text. So in that case, even in the book of Deuteronomy, which is one of the most brutal books out there, where everything is given okay to rape women, kill children.
Oh my goodness. No, it's not. Stop it. Stop it, Billy. Stop it. Stop with the lies. Out of the lies. Hold on. Where is that clip? I got y'all.
Out of her life. Out of her life.
No, you will not find one place in the Bible that says, yeah, go rape women. That's fine. Billy's just making this up. And that's why I say Billy sounds like your classic internet atheist.
If one person talks against your Lord, go to that town and kill the whole town, burn the town down.
So brutal.
It's just too much. Like I said,
it turns people into salt.
The killing in the Bible is not being done by Satan. That's why I don't care.
Again, this is throwing everything in the kitchen sink. Remember, the original conversation started about the resurrection of, or the crucifixion of Jesus. He saw real quick he wasn't going to win that one. So guess what? He's going to throw everything. He's going to throw everything. You're like, well, raping kids out here. They, walking on the sidewalk, shrimp, pigskin. Like, it's just anything that will stick. See, this is what you call information overload. When someone doesn't have an actual argument, they win by throwing a whole bunch of stuff. And when you can't address one, then they think they won, right? When you can't address all of them, they think they won by fact of, hey, you didn't address my shrimp argument. Right? This guy has nothing. Yeah, it's word salad. Yeah, it's word salad rhetoric.
I don't believe in demons and all this other kind of stuff. Moses goes to the top. He talks.
Sir, this debate has convinced me more so that demons exist.
How dare you?
I am more convinced that demons exist by listening to Billy.
To God, he gets his tablet. The first commandments are, thou shalt not kill. He comes down. As soon as he sees the people making a golden calf, he kills most of them. It's just like, come on.
How dare God? How dare God just not let idolatry exist? How dare he not let Billy's Beanpie says address one. You have not been listening. I have been addressing Billy's incoherent statements. At some point, you just realize this person's going to keep making incoherent statements, right? How dare God kill people for violating his law and committing idolatry? See, Billy doesn't have a good anthropology. He doesn't have a good view of harmatology, a good view of sin, that is. He just, hey, God just out here killing these poor victims. They were just minding their business, and God, the big meanie, comes down from heaven and starts just going on a tirade. That's how he presents God. There's just these nice people were just walking their kids to school, and they were teaching them about being good, and God just acts tyrannical. That's how he makes God, right? Right? Yeah, Chavez says, so he doesn't believe in demons, but he preaches the gospel of aliens. Yeah. See, that's why the Bible says the fool says there is no God. And we're talking about the God of the Bible, not this made up God of consciousness that's behind you in your videos. I'm not talking about that false God. I'm talking about Yahweh, the God who you will stand before, Billy, and you will give an account for every word you utter against the blasphemy of him and the idolatry of self. That's the God you will stand before. Not your God that doesn't really have any power, doesn't exist, who really says to yourself, do as thou wilt. This is ultimately a conversation of theodicy, the justification of God in light of evil. I would like to ask Billy, what is your objective moral standard? You've denied the Bible. You've denied God. Okay. What is your objective moral standard by which you argue against God? I would like to know that. See, it's easy to just do these YouTube videos and then have your little buddy right here save you and pile on more stuff while you're having these conversations. But you want to get into moral issues? Okay, let's get into it. What is your moral, objective moral foundation by which you argue against God? Don't appeal to self, because once you do, it's not objective. It's subjective at that point. By what standard have you adopted to say anything is wrong? Not just stuff you don't like about God, anything. I would love to hear that answer. But then again, I might have to get 50K to ask a question.
And I've learned with some of these stories how it correlated with kill your first son, related to then what.
Again, the host is supposed to be the Christian, but he's siding more with Billy. Let's see what Wes has to say.
The God of the Old Testament and Jesus.
Yeah, he doesn't like the God of the Old Testament, which Jesus is that God.
West, and I
might get to say a lot of stuff that I want to say. Go ahead.
I'll shut up.
So
you wasted a lot of time.
Actually, let me just say this. So the most quoted verse of the Bible in the Bible is a version of Exodus 34:6, which fundamentally describes who God is, that he's compassionate and loving, full of grace and mercy and abounding in steadfast love. And so, in fact, if you read the book of Jonah,
that's a good point too. Look at all the sin that God was patient with when it comes to Israel. They were wilding out. They were crashing out just as hard as Billy. And God is being patient with them. Bro, they deserve to be incinerated multiple times. Right? They deserve to be like taken out. But God, what often did the prophets remind God of? Not remind in the sense he forgot, but you made a covenant with Abraham, right? He made a promise, right? That he would preserve a people, a nation through one man. Billy skips all over that, but God showed his wrath on some people. Bro, you are literally experiencing the patience of God. That you are literally not struck dead right in this office. By virtue of getting struck down, the host get it too. Right? God, you're experiencing God's patience and mercy. Every sinner experiences that. From Genesis till when he comes back, you are experiencing the patience and mercy of God. But with that, sinners take that as weakness. Better recognize who you're dealing with. Read Psalm 2. Read Psalm 5. Read Psalm 7. Read Revelation 19. The God who come back dripped in blood. Well, God's a tyrant. No, you are rebellious. You are rebellious. And here's why you act like God's offended by you calling him a tyrant. Okay. What you gonna do? This ain't no battle, bro. This ain't no yin yang battle of good and evil. Bro, God's completely gonna destroy the wicked. like you're the kid throwing a tantrum, and then the parent does something about it, and the child goes say, "You're mean." Oh, so what you think this is? A debate? They no debating with God, bro.
The beef that Jonah has with God, the reason why he doesn't want to go to Nineveh is because he believes that God is so loving that if he tells the Ninevites to repent and they repent, God is going to forgive them. So fundamentally, we have the picture of God consistently throughout the Bible, both in the Old and New Testaments, as being a God who is rich in love and mercy and abounding in steadfast kindness.
That's right.
And so we want a God who is just. And just to speak very briefly to the slavery issue, I mean, Leviticus 25 condemns by death the man stealing. That's so stealing someone and selling them into slavery. And the fact that the 10 Commandments are prefaced with, you are a nation who was slaves. You know, I'm the God of Israel who brought you out of Egypt. So there's a fundamental difference, and there's lots of literature on this. I would encourage people to read my friend Paul Copan's book, Is God a Moral Monster? He's written some excellent stuff. He's also written on Did God Command Genocide in the Old Testament? He's a leading expert in the field of a comparative analysis of ancient Near Eastern war literature. And so there are very coherent explanations for these things, and that slavery within ancient Israel was...
Bean Pie says, if God hates evil, why did he create it? This really shows kind of... so let me deal with your question, because the KJV uses evil, and you actually read the next verse, it's clear that passage is speaking about calamities, not actual evil in the sense of like sin. It's speaking about calamities. I would do a study on that passage, but let me keep going.
Very, very different from what slavery around the ancient Near East was like. And on top of that, once again, when abolition movements happen, what's that?
Christians.
I said slavery continued on throughout the Bible with no problems.
No problems. It was all peaceful. Every Christian was in the Bible just saying, yeah, get along with it. Go. Yeah, be a slave. Slave's good. Billy just makes these claims. It's just like, it's not historically true. It's not biblically true. That's why I have to say, I have to question Billy's motives. Because who lies like this? Who lies like this?
But it was always undergirded by the fact that this was not the ideal, that this was something that should not be done.
That's right.
And even slavery within ancient Israel was fundamentally different than slavery around the ancient Near East. Okay. This is not a contested fact. You can look at the scholarship of individuals like Wright, who's written extensively on this. He's an ancient Near Eastern ethicist. And there's vast difference between the law codes and Leviticus, Deuteronomy.
Bean Pie says we're flipping translation to suit our narratives. I mean, I'm actually giving you what the context of the meaning based on the passage. I mean, that's not an argument you're presenting. You just don't like that's what the passage mean. God creates good. He doesn't create sin. I mean, that's literally what the Bible says. God is not the author of evil. You're disagreeing with the passage. I'm not.
In Numbers, and something like the Code of Hammurabi, which puts people on a tier system and gives different punishments depending on where they are within society. That's not true in ancient Israel. If you were a king and you stole somebody and you sold them into slavery, they would punish you by death.
That's right.
But if you steal somebody else's slave, you can't steal somebody else's slave. That's not a good thing to do, right?
How is that an argument? How like that's not addressing the issue. That's not addressing the issue. Beanpie says God created everything. Yes. Then man fell into sin. Sin came about through the fall, not God's creative order. I mean, I mean, are we Christians? Do we believe the Bible? I mean, my goodness. Well, that's much of that debate. Well, again, I thought it was very interesting. What I may do tomorrow is have Vocab Malone on, and we may talk more about this issue. Carlos says God creating evil is the ultimate straw man, right? Not even knowing what the passage is speaking about, not understanding Hebrew, even parallelism and things like that. Very important to understand meanings of passages like that. May have Vocab on tomorrow night. We may do a late ATT video. We'll see. But also we'll be doing live tomorrow. I'm actually about to do a premiere in like 20 minutes. So be sure to check that out. Like this video. If you're new to this channel, subscribe. We do good content all the time here. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. Have a great rest of your day. Till the next time, grace and peace.